Evening, fellow Toastmasters.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Good
everyone.
evening.
And thank
Hi.
you so much for joining us for session number 4 in our L.E.A.D Executive Development Programme. My name is Distinguished Toastmaster Zivai Matondo, and I will be your meeting chair this evening. And thank you to our Zoom masters, Toastmaster Bertus and Toastmaster Selina, for joining us this evening. And in terms of just a bit of housekeeping, if you can make sure that the name that you have in the participants box is the name that you registered yourself with for the program, for purposes of the attendance register that we are taking every week. So that is something that you just need to do. Just make sure that the name you have is the name that you registered with. And we are ready to start our session for today. And as we normally do, I want to hear feedback from each and every one of you, whether you're typing it in the chat box or whether you'd want to raise your hand and unmute, pertaining to session number 3. We had our session number 3, Friday, the 15th of October, and that was on leadership etiquette with Distinguished Toastmaster Sandra Cooper. If I can hear feedback, what you took away, the assignment, whether you've worked on it, and what your learning, your key learnings were from leadership etiquette. So you can either raise your hand and you can then unmute yourself when I recognize you, or if you would want to type in the chat box, but would also want to hear your voices. So who is going to give us their feedback first? And there was silence in the room. 100% participation. So let us hear from you as our fellow leaders. Toastmaster Carol Ann, please go ahead.
Okay, I will start things off. Do you want my camera on or doesn't it matter?
Well, we would love to see who's sharing their feedback.
Okay. There we go. Hi. Okay, so I found that session extremely interesting and enjoyable, especially the quote of "you only get one chance to make a first impression." And I realized that we don't see ourselves the way other people see us. So those first impressions are very important. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's what you feel, the way you think you're coming across. If you're happy with that, you display enough etiquette in business and, you know, in your life, and you portray an honest, trustworthy person, then at the end of the day, it's not really that important what other people think of us, or we shouldn't stress about whether they think we're fat or ugly or wear glasses or whatever, you know. So whilst first impressions do matter, and I found that very interesting, I also am of the opinion that it's not the be all and end all of everything. And yeah, that's what I took from it. Very interesting.
Great, thank you so much, Toastmaster Carol Ann. Toastmaster Will Scott.
Hey there, Toastmasters. If I want to just say thank you once again for what you guys are doing. I'm thoroughly enjoying this this leadership course, you can call it that. In terms of last week's stuff, I realized that as a guy who lives with a disability, I'm kind of in the minority, but I also have a unique perspective from where I'm coming. So whereas I haven't actually submitted my homework as yet, do look out for it, because I do intend to add a lot of that into that particular conversation, because I think it is important to understand the other.
Great, thank you so much for your feedback, Toastmaster Will. Who is going next? And I'll just read what's in the chat box. Toastmaster Shamila, the key takeaways from last session was to identify your senses and how it helps us to be wholly present while we present ourselves with them first impression, resulting in a lasting impression. Thank you for your key learning. Anyone else who would want to give their key learnings from last session, which was session number 3, leadership etiquette? Toastmaster Gladys, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, DTM Zirai. Actually, I learned a lot. Some things we take for granted, that a smile can change everything. I really learned a lot, though it's like a refresher, but it was very ideal for me. And the one thing I was always laughing the whole week, how to refute, to decline a hug. Sometimes I didn't want a hug, but I just ended up hugging because I didn't know how to decline it. But now I've learned the skills of denying a hug diplomatically. And yeah, some things we just take for granted, and those little things, they do matter. So yeah, I'm very much equipped. Thank you.
Thank you, Toastmaster Gladys. Now being able to diplomatically decline a hug. Toastmaster Andrew, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, thanks, guys. Really, you're doing a fantastic job. Really, it's been very interesting and informative. What I liked about it last week was the fact, you know, with us on Zoom, it's very easy to be lazy and sort of come how you are. But I think if you want to come to a Zoom meeting and that, you've got to prepare yourself, you know, like have a smile, enjoy, prepare yourself to come as if you're coming to a meeting. And that, I think, when that energy you portray, it comes across in the Zoom meeting. That's what I got out of it.
Great. Thank you so much for your feedback. So yes, coming to the online platforms prepared and ready, because I remember, I think it was only 2 days ago, we were asked in a Zoom session to stand up. And I don't know if there are some of you who kind of like dress half the top part of your body only, set up for the meeting. And then you're now asked, okay, stand up, and you've got your pajama bottoms on. So it was really good reminders and tips that we got from DTM Sandra. Do I see any other hand? We've got a bit more time for more feedback. I'll just check in the chats if we have. Okay, Toastmaster Hannah says, what hit home for me was reputation. I realized that some of the things that are said about reputation is easy, but doing them and sticking to those is a challenge to be overcome. So reputation was key. Toastmaster John, the key takeaways were the good leadership etiquette,
Is it not there for you?
greeting people by name, smiling, arriving on time. This is one of the greatest strengths of Toastmasters, starting a meeting on time and ending it right on time. One of my mentors says, early is on time is late. So if you're arriving at 6 p.m. for a 6 p.m. meeting, you're already late. So early is on time. Toastmaster Irina, last session was very interesting. When we talk about leadership, how to influence people, we always talked about values. Last time I learned that our 5 senses can impact our influence to people around us. Very key. Then just a reminder from our Zoom master, please ensure that your own name shows. If not, please rename yourself. Your name also serves for verifying attendance. So for those that joined in a bit later, please just make sure that the name that you have is the name that you registered with. Toastmaster Penny, personal branding was another takeaway for me, as I was able to align myself, identify my values to discover my own vision statement, which is my brand. And as you see, session 1, we went on to, which was the vision, mission, and values. We then did session 2, personal branding, which was also a build up. And then we've done the leadership etiquette. And today we have the emotional intelligence and conflict management. Toastmaster Hannah says, the assignment helped me to think about how I show up. I thought deeply about what I need to do to improve my leadership presence. Toastmaster Malile, it got me introspecting about distractions that I might have as I interact with others. I also enjoyed the conversations about online meeting etiquette. Then Toastmaster Tsepang, greeting people by name and the magic words that helped me a lot. And it's something that I have started doing in my circles. Toastmaster Alila Halifa, learning more about etiquette gave me opportunity to reflect on the ways I show up and what I would like to improve on. If I may ask, there are quite a number of people who've come in as Toastmaster Hannah. Please just check what name you have on your profile, because I know sometimes in some meetings, for some reason, it can pick up one particular person's name. So if you are listed as Toastmaster Hannah and you are not Toastmaster Hannah, if you could please rename yourself so that we can get that sorted. So please just check. I think one person I had seen because of the profile picture is Toastmaster Beverly. Just make sure you rename yourself so that we have your correct name. Because we have quite a number that are listed as participants listed as Toastmaster Hannah Tarindwa. So please rename yourselves so that we have the correct name. That said, we are in for a treat today. We are learning, we are developing ourselves, and not just at a regular pace, but at an accelerated pace. Today, we are going through emotional intelligence and conflict management. And the one quote that I have, which we have on our agenda, is 75% of careers are derailed for reasons related to emotional competencies, including inability to handle interpersonal problems, unsatisfactory team leadership during times of difficulty or conflict, or inability to adapt to change or elicit trust. And this is from the Center for Creative Leadership. So we are here today and we are saying we don't want our careers, whether in business, whether in the organizations that we are in, whether in Toastmasters, to be derailed. And our industry expert that we have, who is sharing with us, I want you to meet this industry expert. He is one of the 2020's 50 under 30 emerging leaders and 2018's top 10 global young future leaders recognized by the US-based HR.com's LEAD Leadership Excellence Awards. His work is in corporate training, specializing in emotional intelligence programs at Mercedes-Benz, MultiChoice, Standard Bank, and various other corporations, aside from his TEDx coaching and secret location adventures. Currently exceeding expectations as the program quality director for Toastmasters in Southern Africa, and he's passionate about redefining leadership in the continent. Help me welcome our facilitator for today, Emotional Intelligence and Conflict Management, Distinguished Toastmaster, Andrew Tsuro.
Thank you
Over to
very
you,
much.
dear.
Thank you very much, Distinguished Toastmaster Zibai. It is the 23rd of March, 2019. I've heard it up to here with emails, hate speech on my public profiles, and I'm not so sure I can carry it anymore. I've got three options to take this situation at hand. And I want you to imagine this balloon as my emotional container. The first option is for me to just pop and let that loud noise impact everybody around me. You make a decision, because the second option I have is like this balloon. Just sometimes let the air release itself bit by bit, and then see how best I can release the air. It's tightened, I'm trying to hold it in, but still there's that loud noise. I've got the third option, which I didn't mention. In this case, this option allows me to just get to myself like this air and release the air. On the other hand, I also have the option of letting the full-blown balloon burst, but not necessarily by a pop of something, but just letting the air leave out from the balloon as easily as it can. Which option would be most ideal? Do I make the loudest pop noise? Or do I try and hold it in until I've got no control over it and then it pops? Or do I let the air go out and make that irritating noise for however long it takes for all that air to come out? Or better yet, do I let my emotions run wild and let's see who is affected? You make your choice. Contrary to popular belief, people are creatures of emotion and not logic. And hence that makes us as people gregarious. How do you release your emotions? Are you like that balloon that pops and everyone's attention sways towards you, creating a scene, and everybody, and I mean everybody, has to pay attention to you? Or are you that person who suppresses all your emotions in until you can't control it, and again it pops, and still people wonder what's happening? Or are you that person who releases slowly, trying to minimize the amount of noise and disruption in your emotions as you release them? Or are you also that balloon that releases their emotions and we always wonder, where is this balloon going to land? This evening, I hope at the outcome of this program, you might have an idea of who you are and who you wish to be in the near future. Welcome to the conversation around emotional intelligence. And in this conversation, there is one thing that remains true. Anyone can get angry, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. Anybody, anyone can get angry, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. And that is why you and I, as leaders, are challenged to develop our emotional intelligence and use it in managing conflict. As you share and as you think about it, think about what kind of a balloon your emotional container is like, and how do you release it? But as we talk about this, the first question that I have for you right now, and I would love to see the conversations on the chat, how do you feel? Do you feel happy, sad, angry, scared, disgusted, or surprised? Any of these 6 emotions, how do you feel right now? I'd like to see that on the chat box. Happy, 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 scared, happy. I see someone who did not follow. Angry, happy. Happy, sad, and angry at the same time. It's complicated. Happy, angry. Now, if I were to take this a step further and ask you, how do you really feel? How do you really feel? How do you really feel? I've taken it a step further. How do you really feel? You've got those options in front of you. Confused, happy still? How do you really feel, Paul? How do you really feel? Tired, worthless? Irina says confused, peaceful, sad, optimistic, peaceful, tired, content, so happy. How do you really feel, Tsepang? Furious, excited, frustrated? Definitely, I see you. Bliss, happy, open, confused, overwhelmed. From this day onwards, I want to encourage each one of you, as you greet somebody and they respond, I feel good. Take note, good is not one of the options you've got there. When someone responds, I'm okay, take note that okay is not one of the emotions there. How do you really feel? Now, the first question that I asked was, how do you feel? And I gave you 6 options, which is happiness, sadness, anger, being scared, disgusted, and being surprised. Those are the 6 basic primary emotions that any human being carries at any point in time. Other literature will tell you that there is 8, but the main literature will remind you that there are 6 basic emotions: the happiness, the surprise, the sadness, the disgust, as well as the fear, the anger, or the surprise. Those are the 6 primary emotions that you carry at any given go. Now, that does not mean when you say you are happy, it does not mean that there's no anger within you, there's no fear within you, there's no disgust within you. It just simply means 51% majority shareholder in that emotional container of yours is happiness. 51% when you are sad is that it's filled with sadness. This doesn't mean there's nothing that you're not happy about. It means there is that. And so why do I ask you this? If we go around not knowing how we feel, how do we expect to become emotionally intelligent? If we go around not knowing how we feel, how do we expect to become emotionally intelligent? Are we just not clutching at straws, hoping that someone else is able to read the room, yet you yourself are not able to read your own self? But it goes a step further. I asked you, how do you really feel? Some of you kept on saying you're happy. And now happy is a big spectrum of emotions. It's either you're joyful, and you're joyful because you're either liberated or ecstatic. Some of you are happy because you're feeling powerful, and you're feeling powerful because you're feeling either because you're courageous or you're provocative. You've got the power. Some of you are feeling happy because you're optimistic, and you're optimistic because you're feeling inspired and you're open. So let's take time to check in with ourselves and find out how we really feel before we relate to other people, to other beings. Remember, people are creatures of emotion and not logic. And so when we start understanding ourselves, we'll learn that in emotional intelligence, self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. Now, how wise are you at this point in time? Self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. I want to encourage you to start doing this check-in a lot more often with yourself. And as you engage with other creatures of emotion, find out really how they're feeling. Many of us sometimes don't know that we're depressed because we can't recognize that as an emotion. So we go around okay. And when that balloon bursts, we're surprised because you didn't see it coming. Emotional intelligence starts with you. So let's unpack this self-awareness that we're talking about and understand what it is. But before then, we want to understand then what is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is us being able to recognize and understand emotions in ourselves and others. But not only that, once we understand these emotions, we want to use this awareness that we've gained to manage your behavior and relationships. So when someone says they're emotionally intelligent, this is what it really means. They've got the ability to recognize and understand emotions in themselves, in this case, in yourself. And number two, use this awareness to manage your behavior and relationships. Ultimately, an emotionally intelligent person is a fulfilled person. An emotionally intelligent person is a fulfilled person. Ask yourself a few questions when you look into the concept of self-awareness. Number one, are you able to perceive your emotions at the moment? Someone say they're happy, they're sad, they're fearful at the same time. What's the majority shareholder at that point in time? What are you really feeling at that point in time? What is the majority shareholding emotion at that particular time? Secondly, do you understand your tendencies across situations? I always share with my colleagues that some of my colleagues are only kind when they are happy. And when they are happy, that's when they are generous. That's when they will give out. That's when they will buy you a meal. When they're not that kind. Know yourself. Do you know what you are like when you're angry, when you're frustrated? Do you know what emotion what actions you exude at that point in time? In our continent right now, we are going through cases and rising issues around gender-based violence, around abuse in many forms, workplace discrimination, workplace challenges, and they come from us not knowing how we react when we are going through these emotions. Do you know how you react when you're angry, when you're sad, when you're happy, when you're disgusted, when you are sad, or maybe when you're fearful? Do you know how you react? If not, this is the journey that you might want to walk in order to gain that self-awareness. Why? Because self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. Now, for you to do this, ask yourself, what am I feeling? Those emotions. Secondly, ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling it? Every emotion is triggered by certain triggers, and then know and reflect on your behaviors. When you know something, you do better. So you are encouraged to think around it and start working around this. But why is this important in our leadership spectrum, in our leadership journey? It is important. Why? Because when you know better, chances are you've got a better understanding of other people that you're working with. And remember, this is about you being fulfilled, so you manage your relationships better. Earlier, there was an emotion that was shared that I want to take us back to. In our relationship, there's an emotion that people underestimate, and that emotion is called insecurity. Can anyone notice where insecurity is from? Is from which compartment of emotion? Anybody? Can anybody notice where insecurity is coming from? Insecurity. Fear. So it's coming from an element of fear. That's one. And what causes insecurity? Inferiority, inadequacy. Now tell me if you have been dealing with a sense of insecurity in the right manner after what you know now. Tell me you've been handling your relationships that you have where there's a sense of inferiority in the right manner to treat it. In majority of cases, I found out no. We've been underwhelmingly treating inferiority as a sense of something that is hogwash. And yet each of us have got something that we feel we lack, that we fear, and sometimes we deal with. I do notice the hands, but I'm going to ask, if possible, to either put the question on the chat or when we just jot it down so that when we engage on the question and answer segment, we will be able to relate to some of these and try and go back. Having said that, we now need to remember that our emotional intelligence requires us to look at this concept of self-awareness is our ability to then reflect on our behaviors and know your triggers. So if there's anything that we want to be able to remember tonight is that self-awareness is not about discovering deep, dark secrets or unconscious motivations in your life. Things that happened when you were a child that unfortunately tend you to become something that you don't recognize today. It's not about that. But self-awareness is about developing a straightforward understanding, honest understanding of what makes you fulfilled. Instead of discovering the wrongs that made us to be where we are today, I want you to look at self-awareness as discovering and developing that straightforward understanding of what makes you fulfilled, what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what brings you out of bed each and every morning to face the day. And once you're able to do this, then you might want to then understand what it is that takes your journey to fulfillment. I see Alia's hand is still up. Alia, I'll indulge you at this moment. Please come ahead. Go ahead. Please note you're muted in case you're speaking. All right, in case you come back, I'll let you just interrupt me and then we can carry the conversation going. So having recognized that we are looking at discovering the things that make us fulfilled, how do we do this? It starts by us asking ourselves this question: what makes your identity? What makes your identity? Anything on the chat, what makes your identity? What do you feel makes your identity? And the scenario I always love to put across is that if you were to meet with someone from your congregation, if you are a religious person, if you were to meet someone from your after night, the dark time of the night, if you're a clubber, if you go to a club and you meet someone and they are together, and you meet someone from work and you meet someone from your family and you meet someone from your family and you meet your partner, and all these people meet you at the very same time, what is the one consistent thing that makes your identity? I see belief systems, I see religion, I see personality, I see abilities, I see values, I see good manners. I see characteristics, the fact that you're a woman. What makes your identity? This is possibly the question that we are asked many times when we get into interviews and they say, tell me about yourself. Great energy, integrity, the impression that I had, my authenticity. What makes your identity? From the studies of EQ, we say your identity is formed by 4 main quadrants. What we call your remembered identity, your reflected identity, your programmed identity, and your created identity. Those 4 quadrants. Now, what are those 4 quadrants? Let's explore them in detail, at least in some form of detail. Your remembered identity. And I want you to work with me this time. Your remembered identity is like you looking into the rear view mirror of your car, if it's working. And this is where you remember events in your life that have helped you form a sense of self. What happened in your past that have helped you form a sense of self? I always give an example of myself. I never at one point in time imagined that I'll be a corporate trainer. However, when I look back into my rear view mirror, I recognize a series of times when I was in class, whether it being in primary school, in high school, or wherever, where I used to literally stand on a chair to write on the chalkboard and teach my fellow classmates. And it's interesting that this is somewhat the path that I find in, and I find myself in that same career at this point in time. Again, I never assumed I would get there, but those are some of the things that I can look back in my rearview mirror and reflect on. What about you? What events in the past have helped you form a sense of self? When you say to me, you're a strong person, what events in the past have helped you form a sense of self? When you say that you are a handsome person, what events in the past have helped you form a sense of handsomeness? When you say to us that you are a go-getter, what events in the past have helped you form a sense of self? Think about it for a moment. And if you've got it, just type in done on the chat box. If you've got your remembered identity, please just type in done on the chat box. If you're lost, please let me know, just type in lost. I'll work with the first person who types in lost to discover this. If you're done, just type in done. I'll see by the numbers if we are good to continue. What events in the past have helped you form a sense of self? Cool. I see majority of us are done, are good, or at least quite a number of us are responding as done and good. That's one. Keep that in. I hope you've taken note of it somewhere. The second aspect is your reflected identity. Now, as you can see by the graphic there, your reflected identity is other people remembering events in your past and they remind you of them. This must be interesting. What do people from the past remember most and remind you of it consistently today? Remember, this is no longer you looking into that mirror. It is other people bringing that old picture of you and consistently reminding you of them. Can you think of something? Now, I'm always reminded that I used to be very, 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 very bullied, much as I was when I was a prefect or somewhat in my school journey. And I'm taking it far back then because it's a picture that is consistently brought about at this stage. I always made it clear, confrontation about what I want. And I always made it clear that if we can't give each other this, then it might not work out. Apparently, that was termed as being a bully. So that is my reflected identity. Are you still a strong-willed? That's the term they use most of my colleagues. Are you still as strong-willed as you were back then? What about you? Do you have your remembered identity? If you're done, again, another done on the chat box would help to just track that we are there, we're together. If you're lost, please do type in on the chat and I'm willing to help you on the spot. Reflected identity. Other people remember things about your past. Beautiful. I see a lot of people are done. Having said this, we've spoken about the remembered identity. We've spoken about the reflected identity. Those are all in the past. You can't change them. Take note, you can't change those events in the past. And the past, for some of you, is just last week because it's that visible, it's that memorable. For some of you, the past is just last year. For some of you, the past is just yesterday. And it's going to be carried on. You can't change that. And you can't also dictate what other people remember about you. Let's go to the next identity, the programmed identity. Parents in the room, are we not culprits of this one to our young ones? But I guess we are also victims of this one from many other people. The program identity is us installing a software in other people. This is the result of other people sending messages about who you are and who you will become in the future. What do most people say about you and your future? What's your programmed identity? What do most people say about you and your future? What's your programmed identity? Can you think of your programmed identity? What do most people say about you and your future? And this, at this point in time, this is where I want to address those ones that say, you can say whatever you like about me. This is me, take me for who I am. Are you proud of saying that? Have you taken time to reflect on it? How do most people describe you? Or what do you hear that people describe you as? If you have been one of those people who have been closing their ears and eyes to what people say about them, I want to encourage you today and going forward to take note of it. Just take note. Take time to just take note of it. Whenever you're ready, and I'm not saying admit to it, take note. Like an email, just noted it. Note it. What's your programmed identity? I see some people are done. So I'm assuming we're on the same page. And last but not least, the created identity. By the look of things, I'm sure you can have an idea of what the created identity is all about. The created identity is all about you and your future. It is the only identity that we have full control over because you decide what you create and how it is put together and it's futuristic. It is not controlled by the past or by other people. Remember, the remembered identity is controlled by the past and you remember that, but you can't change the past. The reflected identity is controlled by the past and other people remembering this. So you don't control it. You can't change it. Your programmed identity is current and futuristic, but it's controlled by other people. So the one quadrant that you've got full control over is your created identity. What is your created identity? The one that you've got full control over. Now, this is where it gets very important for us as leaders, particularly taking notes from the previous two sessions on etiquette and personal branding. This is where you need to be able to define your created identity. For some of us, the use of a vision board helps. But for many of us, the following techniques have been useful in developing a created identity. Intrapersonal skills such as visualization, picturing it, which is the vision board is one of those examples. positive affirmations, whether it's a song, whether it's words, whether it is some script or literature or Bible verse, whatever you look into as a positive affirmation. Whether it's recognizing negativity as negativity, because some of us don't recognize negativity as negativity. We see it as a push. Every wet blanket that comes into our life is somewhere there to push us to become better. And we somehow suck it in, and then we make it a gregarious thing, because as humans, we are creatures of emotion and not logic. So we pass on, we are gregarious, we affect one another. Do we recognize negativity? Are we able to practice positive decision making? And last but not least, can we cultivate empathy? Self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. And this is just the snippet of it. I hope at this stage in time, you have started thinking a little bit, just a little bit, about what your self-awareness journey ought to be like. And I hope it sparks a thought, it triggers an impact for you to be able to take it in. Your intrapersonal skills, visualization, positive affirmations, recognizing negativity, positive decision-making, and empathy are critical in developing a created identity that you can work on. I see a comment there from Faso. So Faso, we're talking about the intrapersonal skills that you have to work on yourself in order to create that positive created identity, that personal brand that you want to be recognized as, that etiquette, that image that you want to be seen as. For you to do this, you've got to take note of interpersonal skills such as visualization, where you create something and you see it on a daily basis. This is what I want to be like. This is where I want to be. Positive affirmations, telling yourself, I am great, I am confident, I am positive, I am driven, and so forth. Telling us, and then recognizing negativity is all about now taking awareness of what's happening around you. When someone tells you you're stupid, you don't recognize that as someone pushing you. You are able to recognize it as negativity and shunning it out. Because some people have got some challenges that they now release on you. Remember, I mentioned that humans are gregarious. They affect one another because they're creatures of emotion. And so if we are unable to recognize negativity, we will take in negativity thinking it's a normal thing. It's a normal element. It's a normal part of life. We always have people who are negative to us and we're supposed to accept it. And yet it's something, there are certain things, there are certain lines that we're not meant to cross, and then they affect how we see ourselves, how that identity of yours is created, because there's been negativity coming through. So I hope that makes sense. And then obviously positive decision making is making positive decisions that are beneficial to you, making sure that you're not becoming destructive to yourself, as well as then practicing empathy, understanding that you are around people. So sometimes talking about it is essential in that setting. I hope that brings you back to where we are in terms of self-awareness. Now, we've spoken about self-awareness to a certain level of depth. But how does this relate to conflict management? I'm going to play this small clip. And in this small clip, there's just one line that I want you to highlight, to pick up and let it be etched on you. One line. It might feel like two, but it's just one line. And I hope you pick it up. It's from a scene from a movie that I'm sure some of us recognize.
Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of fate, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears, knows but the horror of the shade. And yet, the menace of the years binds and shall bind me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
I'll play it one more time, just that one line. And if you got it, please type it in the chat box. And I know the audio sound is a bit low, so I do need, you did need to stretch your listening capabilities a little bit more, just so that we can work around that. But there we go, one more time.
Out of the night that covers me, black as the bed from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of fate, I hid as bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears, looms but the horror of the shade. And yet, the menace of the years binds and shall bind me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. No one can make you angry. You choose to be angry. No one can make you sad. You choose to be sad. No one can make you happy. You choose to be happy. No one can control how you feel. They can influence it. They can motivate it. They can trigger it. But ultimately, it is your choice. And when you are unable to make that choice, one of two things. It's either that's the time where you've got that chemical imbalance and you need clinical help, or you have given away that choice or that decision to someone. So I'm the master of my fate. Whatever happens to you tomorrow, if tomorrow you wake up and your club is not distinguished, you are the master of your fate. Blame nobody but you. If tomorrow you wake up and things are not going well at the workspace, you decided to be the master of your fate. Take accountability and responsibility. You are the master of your own fate. You are the captain of your soul. How you feel is up to you. In certain situations, you've got an opportunity to walk away, but you choose to fight. For whatever reason, you know better. Make that a conscious decision because you are the captain of your own soul. When you choose to walk away, there's a song that was shared with me some time ago, and it's called Coward of the County by Kenny Rogers, I believe. If you listen to it, it speaks to the same concept. When you choose to walk away, Again, you're the captain of your soul. How you feel, if you feel inferior, if you feel worthless, if you feel inadequate because you chose to walk away from a conflict situation, you are the captain of your soul. If you choose to fight and get into a brawl or whatever kind of a fight that will keep you stressed, you are the captain of your soul. You made that choice. Make your choices consciously. And so when we deal with conflict management, when you're applying emotional intelligence, remember that it's really about ultimately becoming fulfilled. And how do we get to this point? It's by building something called social awareness. In social awareness, you are building the ability to recognize other people's emotions. But how will you be able to recognize happiness if you yourself do not recognize happiness in yourself? How will you be able to recognize sadness if you have no experience of understanding what you are like when you're sad? When you can't tell the difference between sadness and fear, how will you be able to recognize it in other people? So the first part of it is you deal with self. Secondly, it is then ultimately you showing empathy to now become to develop more positive relationships, and last but not least, minimize unproductive conflict. Now, how do we minimize unproductive conflict? I'm sure it's easier said than done, but I can also assure you, it's even when you know how to do it, it's not an easy thing, but it's an emotionally intelligent task. And that's why EQ is possibly one of the top 7 skills that are required in this day and age, because of the challenge, the difficulty that or the complexity of what our working experiences are like in this day and age. So let's look at the ABCDE challenge, which was developed by Dr. Albert Ellis when he was looking at how to bust something called stress, because you can't be fulfilled when you're stressed. Now, again, it goes back to that conversation where we ask ourselves, do we know the difference between stress and tiredness? Stress and some fear. That is our challenge. But at this point in time, the ABCDE challenge challenges you to think about this. What's number A? What's the activating event? What triggers you? Now, I want you to think of your pet peeves. Do you have any pet peeves? Things that you don't like, that you don't love, that they just rile you up? Can you think of those? Yeah? For me, it's when you respond with a K. Now my colleagues know. When you respond with a K, you know, that's that K. It's a trigger for me. When you there you go, my president. You're trying to trigger it. But don't worry, I will put my EQ to the test. What are my beliefs about this trigger? That's the B. What are your beliefs about your trigger? What do I believe about people who respond to K? Lazy people. I believe they're lazy people. That's my belief, or one of. What are your beliefs about your activating event or your triggers? The C, what are the consequences of this? The consequences for me of such people, to me, as I get frustrated, I want you to cut the tie with that person. I'm like, I can't be working with you if you're this lazy. Remember, these are the consequences of my beliefs of this activating trigger. So what are the consequences? Some of your consequences are hectic because you literally address it immediately. You scream at that person, you shout at that person, you reprimand that person, whether it's a child or anything. What are the consequences of this? You tell them a piece of your mind, you give them a piece of your mind. What are the consequences? With me, like I said, we get to cutting ties, or we confront the situation, and it's not a pretty sight most of the times, particularly if I feel powerful enough to address you. Here becomes the challenging part. Dispute this belief. Are you asking me to dispute that these people are not lazy? In other literature, they even say, dispute this irrational belief of yours that people who respond with K are lazy people. Let's dispute it. Now, because I've done this example, it's easy, it's faster for me to dispute it, but I'm sure for you, it's going to be a challenge and it's going to take a lot out of you to do so, but that's the process. In me disputing this irrational belief of people that respond with a K, and I remember my belief says these people are lazy. If I were to dispute this irrational belief, no, they're not lazy. Actually, they're very busy people to try and type OK in full. So they're not lazy people. They're just very busy people, actually. Or in a funny way, I'll dispute it. The first few days, I'll say they're saving ink by typing K, but it used to be one of those. But to dispute this irrational belief, so when you don't like, for example, I saw someone mentioning that people who keep you waiting and delaying and not communicating, if you were to dispute that irrational belief that those people are just whatever horrible people, you dispute that irrational belief by thinking that they might be in trouble, something might be wrong. Good question, Busi. Why are we disputing this irrational belief? We are demystifying the stress. We are trying to see it from a different angle. Try and see what could be a real reasonable response to this. That might not be the truth, but remember, you are reconditioning your mind because the stress stays with you. The frustration stays with you. The feelings, the emotions that you carry stay with you. And that's a good question at the right time. Those emotions stay with you. You're like that person carrying a sack of tomatoes and you're carrying them because you're frustrated. You're carrying your tomatoes, hoping that you have a time to just throw them to somebody, but you never get the chance because that person just always outsmarts you. It's like trying to get pigs to stay in a clean place. Let's see who wins. So you've got to dispute this irrational belief because you want to try and see it from their perspective and go, as I tell my other colleagues, forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they are doing. Where you just let it go because sometimes it's not worth it. And by disputing this irrational belief, you come up with an effective alternative scenario. So good question there. Do you dispute because you're in denial? No, you dispute because you want to find a more stress-free way of dealing with the situation. Because if you continue with that route, you're still going to experience that challenge. It's almost like I'm still going to fight and argue with that person, but then you are going to still deal with the emotions. You're still going to be frustrated. Now, remember, you're dealing with yourself. You want to free yourself. You want to be fulfilled. You want to get rid of stress. You want to get rid of the frustration. So what does emotional intelligence say? Remember, you're pursuing fulfillment. So when you're pursuing fulfillment, let's try and see why would they be doing this in their world? What's happening in their world that makes them think that this is all right? And when you get to learn that, oh, shame, they don't know anything. These pigs, they don't know anything about cleanliness. So the only good thing they know is that this is it. It's like trying to convince a pig that you must stay smart, you must bath twice a day. They will never understand it. So you are always going to be frustrated and angry and you know, carry that emotion. And that emotion only affects you because that pig goes home so nicely and happily. For some of you who work with millennials, I know you blame us millennials for being too entitled, for being too quick. We want 2 minute things. We want things too fast. Guess what? When I leave the office at 4 p.m. or at 4:30 p.m., I have a good time. What do? You carry all those emotions, and where do you deposit them? On your loved ones. And so you make a choice whether you want to take on this challenge to release the frustration that you have so that you can actually come up with an effective alternative scenario, or you carry this frustration that you've got and run with it in your own space. And yes, if it's an everyday thing, it means you're not coming up with an effective alternative scenario because you're hell-bent on doing things the way you see it. That person does not see it the same way you do. So you've got to get into their world and see how nice it is staying in a dirty place, and then try and convince them that it's nicer staying in a clean place. So my effective alternative scenario in my case situation is talking and having that conversation with someone, but not on the chat, not in the moment because I'm heated. It's that having that call and having a joke and laughing about it and using it as an example in conversations where we are lighthearted like this. Already 1 or 2 people now know that they shouldn't respond with a K. And that's how tomorrow, I can promise you, none of you in this call will respond with a K intentionally. That's my effective alternative scenario. For someone, it's helping them understand what it feels like when you, I see someone responding with an O. For some of you, it's having that person who is delayed, who comes then and recognizing it. But remember, here, this challenge is up to you to take it. When you take it and you take it through, because of the frustration you go in disputing your belief that you believe so hard on, you're going to come up with an effective alternative scenario. And when you do, this is where you answer the question, what outcome do I want out of this? And so for you to be able to understand what outcome you want out of this, you obviously have to understand that you're dealing with people like this person. How many times have you met people like this? They smile, but they are deeply depressed. They smile, but they're deeply depressed. And so why does this person feel this way? This is where you're cultivating your empathy, because empathy does not come when everything is hunky-dory. Empathy comes when you are dealing with a frustrating employee, team member, or exco member, or friend who doesn't understand. So empathy, that's when it kicks in. That's where your EQ is tested. If it was easy, everyone would have it, but it's not. So this is where the challenge comes in. Why does this person feel this way? What are they dealing with that I don't see? And the challenge comes, be kind, for everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, for everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So what's my ask at the end of the day? My ask for you is to remember that when you're communicating, check your aura. Check your aura. What's your aura? It's the energy you bring into a room. If you're a leader, do people stop by and recognize you and say, oh, yeah. Oh, would you like some coffee? Or is it business as usual? People continue doing what they do when you get into the room? Or are you that person who, when you walk into the room, everyone's like, oh no, I was hoping today you would wake up sick, or she would wake up not feeling well. I was hoping they would have meetings out of town. Check your aura. Watch for non-verbal cues. Are people feeling it, or are they not? In an online platform like this, are people still happy with this conversation, or is it too deep for their liking? And last but not least, prepare people for constructive criticism. Before you volunteer to give constructive criticism, ask, would you like some feedback? Can I give you some feedback at this point in time? When they say no, you know they're not ready to receive it. Give it time. When they say yes and they still fight back, remind them that they gave you the opportunity to give feedback. It goes differently. Prepare people for constructive criticism. Ultimately, you're going to then get to a point where you learn of the power of intention. And what is our intention? It's avoiding the oops moments. What is intention? It's anything that precedes any purposeful action. Before you do anything, before you get into a conflict situation, before you fight with someone, before you argue with someone, before you reprimand someone, before you correct someone, ask yourself, what outcome do I want out of this? When I go with this, what outcome do I want out of this? Before you fight conflict or say anything, I used to be told, think before you speak, by my brother. What outcome do you want out of this? Influence is the result of purposeful action. And impact is how intention and influence are measured in the world. Some of us, we see something that our club presidents or our bosses do wrong. And because we don't ask ourselves what outcome we want out of this, we go charging at our boss's office to tell them what they're doing wrong. And what happens? The boss doesn't listen even though you are right. Why? Because the boss does not respect you. Chances are, majority of times, you do not listen to people you don't respect. Until you respect me, you will pay attention. But as long as you don't listen, you don't respect me, you will not be listening to me. And so what happens is when you're emotionally intelligent, you have gathered the concept of intention, and you realize that he's not going to listen to me because he doesn't respect me, but he respects Mr. John. So Mr. John, you speak to Mr. John because that's the intention. And then you've got influence over Mr. John so that Mr. John can pass on that message to the boss, who in a weird manner, even though you're at the same level, your boss respects Mr. John over you. But guess what? What outcome did you want? You wanted a change of behavior. And sometimes you do not have to be the hero of the change. You just have to be the influence of the change. Question is, in your setting, what do you want to be? Emotional intelligence is less about what we want to see happening in our spaces, but more about the impact that we want to see going on an each and everyday basis. And sometimes it challenges us to become a little bit more critical on ourselves more than we are on other people. It's about knowing how you feel and how to manage your feelings, and then using that awareness to understand how others feel and manage those relationships to keep them positive so that you can be fulfilled. It's no use being the only emotionally intelligent person in a setting, because guess what? They'll frustrate you, they'll eat you up. And if you don't take up the ABCDE challenge, you will consistently be fighting. So if you have been fighting with someone and they've not been changing, it means that you're not intentional enough. That is what I have to share for tonight at the moment. Thank you. Back to you, Madam Program Director.
Thank you, distinguished Toastmaster Andrew. If we can light up the chat box, if we can send him the emojis, emotional intelligence. It was time for us to look, well, it was time for me to check myself to say, what aura do I carry? Do people leave the room or start talking amongst themselves because I've entered? Or do I light up the room? So even as we are going through all these sessions, it's to look at ourselves as leaders. How have we been leading? And as we continue to build brick upon brick, at the end of the 10 weeks, you definitely will have accelerated your growth in developing yourself to be a more effective leader. So I just want to thank distinguished Toastmaster Andrew. Thank you for taking us through emotional intelligence as well as conflict management. We will now take our 5-minute bio break. And if I can also ask, just remind people to check who the name that they are in the room with. We've had a technical glitch and we have quite a number of Hana Tarindwas. So please just check your what name you're listed as so that you can rename yourself. If you're failing to rename yourself, please direct message the co-hosts and we will rename you if you can't do it yourself. We've messaged directly individuals, so please do check so that you know to rename yourself for purposes of the register. So it's 19:15. We will have our 5-minute stretch break, bio break. Grab your hot beverage, cold beverage. Then we'll pick up with question and answer segment straight after the break. Thank you, Zoom masters. Welcome back, everyone. I hope we had our stretch and took in some fluids. We will now get into the question and answer, and you can either type in the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand and unmute, and then distinguished Toastmaster Andrew will be able to respond. Do I see any hands? Okay, Toastmaster Will, please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Program Quality Director. It's so good to see you again, and thank you so much for your presentation. There is I don't know now if this is something that you've come across, but there is an assumption, or rather just an observed pattern within people. That is to say that the way that someone reacts to you says a lot more about them than it actually does about you. If you think of it in that way, you may consider then what your response could be, and frankly, if it's harsh, how damaging it might be to that person. What would you say to that particular assertion, sir?
Great question, Will, and I lean towards accepting that understanding of the way you respond is a reflection of yourself in any case. My response comes in twofold. Number one being particularly the aspect of, I always say to people, if someone does not respect you, don't stoop low to their level also to disrespect them. You lose nothing by respecting them in place. However, as we both know, that's a challenge. And so sometimes you're forced to disrespect them to also show the case. But I always say you are almost stooping down to their low level that you actually despise to be like them. And it usually comes from a place of not knowing. And that place of not knowing is similar to that saying that says, if you don't heal from what hurt you, you bleed on those who did not intend on hurting you. And so understanding that sometimes we are dealing with people who are bleeding from things that have hurt them in the past. And so that's where empathy needs to be activated. And it's nice to say empathy because it sounds like a nice cushy word until you now have to practice it. It's not that easy. And that's where EQ comes in for you to then be able to recognize that they might be coming from a position or a point of being hurt, and then they have to deal with it. And so you are almost like an outlet where things are just, unfortunately, like a balloon, it's popping next to you, and you didn't contribute to that balloon being as full as it is onto you. So that's my assertion towards that. I hope that answers your question appropriately.
Superb answer. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Anyone else with a question, you can either raise your hand and then unmute, or if you'd like to type in the chat box. Toastmaster Nkosana says, what other programs are available to improve this skill?
Good question. I don't know if habits is a program, but I would say just your daily habits. Emotional intelligence is not actually a skill that you get and then you install the software and then you've got it. It's actually a practice of your daily habits, how you react, how you respond, how you speak, how you connect, how you are perceived by people. So it's almost as though you are in life training, and you almost need to be always on show. I'm not sure if DTM Sandra last week highlighted this, but she taught me that as a leader, you're always on show. So you've got to think about how you present yourself to the best around people. And so your daily habits inculcate or contribute towards the skill of improving your emotional intelligence. Getting through, sometimes you lose it, and then being able to reflect on it at the end of the day to say, I think I could have handled that better. And having the courage to either go and relate with it and speak to someone about it or that particular person and just iron it out. That's how you are trained to become an emotionally intelligent person. So I don't know if that answers your question appropriately as well, Lupolo.
Thank you. Toastmaster L.E.A. has her hand raised.
Good evening, Mr. Tsuro.
Good evening.
I just wanted to find out, so being in a position of leadership and having to lead and manage people, obviously EQ, like you mentioned, is something that's key to do so. How do you, or at what point do you as a leader sort of hold up the mirror for the people that you lead when they're not in the space to see the reality of what situation they're in? So my example is I lead teachers, and a teacher is not necessarily doing the best or delivering a level of excellence in a classroom, but she is in denial and not accepting the actual truth. What is the best way to go around that and hold up the mirror for them to actually see what is the reality?
Beautiful question. I deal with it almost on an everyday basis, particularly in Toastmasters too. And my answer to that is there are many ways to skin a cat, not literally though, but my recommended approach towards that is firstly asking yourself, is your measure of excellence or the best the same measure that this other teacher is using to measure their excellence or their best? Now, if I see excellence is getting 80% and you see excellence is getting 100%, then already there is conflict. And where there is conflict, that's where we obviously now need to handle that. Number one, let's go through that aspect of understanding what is our measure of excellence. So when you hold the mirror in your words, I expect or suggest that you take that and then review what your measure of excellence is. Number two, don't tell them that you want them to achieve 100%. Influence them to want to achieve 100%. You cannot control whether you're the head teacher, the head principal, or the CEO of your company. You cannot control what people do. You have to now go back and then influence them to want to achieve 100%. Now, how do you influence that teacher to want to 100%? There are ways, but it's summed up in two ways. People are either driven by the pursuit of pleasure or fear of something. Two drivers. It's either they want certain pleasure or they want to drive away from fear. So if I'm a fear avoider or if I'm a risk avoider in other terms, you then want to highlight to me, what are the consequences of me not getting 100%? Then that will be my motivation. If I'm a pleasure seeker, what's the benefit? What's the great goal of actually achieving 100%? And let them see it from their angle, from their side, and then they will uptake it. On the other front, I always say our motivation is not enough. So if right now, if I were to think of the person you love the most, if I were to say to you, there's a tree in front of your house. If you don't give me $1,000 US, I'm going to cut that tree down. How many of you would give me $1,000? By a show of hands. I can see by your facial expression that you're saying, why don't you come and cut it 10 minutes ago, right? But if you thought about the person you love, and I say to you, I've kidnapped them and I've got a gun pointed at their head. And I said, if you don't give me $1,000, US, that is, I'm going to shoot them off. I'm sure many of you would be giving me 1,000 and offering even more to protect them. Now, it's the same thing with motivation. You can't offer me a penny expecting me to do wonders with a penny, and yet I'm not motivated by a penny. Find out what motivates that person to want to achieve more, to do more, and then they will take it on. And particularly in the workplace, I always say to people, not everyone is doing that job because they love it. Some people are just doing it because of the sake of doing it, because that's what gives them their income or the SMS on the 25th, or they're doing it because they just want to get away from home and that's why they're doing it. So always understand what's the internal motivation of that particular individual and apply it. I hope those two scenarios or two approaches give you an idea of how to handle that situation, L.E.A.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, DTM Andrew. Toastmaster Nobantu says, when going through the A, B, C, D, E, please clarify the disputing this belief. My pet peeve is people being late.
Okay, Nobantu, are you able to unmute? Let's have this as a conversation.
Yes, I am.
Great. So your pet peeve, your activating event is people being late. How do you feel about people being late? What are your beliefs about people who are always late?
It's that they don't respect my time, and it's just go lucky for them.
What happens to people who don't respect your time and disrespectful of your time? What happens to people who disrespect your time? What do you do? How do you feel?
Irritated, extremely
Irritated.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you like that
extremely
feeling of
irritated.
feeling irritated? Do you like that
No.
feeling of feeling irritated? So you don't want that
No,
feeling
not-
of feeling irritated. Okay,
That's
and you're
correct. No, I
irritated
don't.
because people disrespect your time.
Mhm. That's
Okay,
correct.
so our root cause here that we're dealing with is disrespect. Let's change it around. Think about these people who do not come on time. Let's assume they had a valid reason for not coming on time and always being late. What do you think it is? I've got an example. What do you think that could be?
Okay, I think they just are tardy sometimes, but sometimes there's a genuine reason. And usually I find that the people who have a genuine reason of being late have the courtesy to inform you that they're running late. But there are just some that coming late is just normal for them.
Okay, so some people it's just normal for them. Let's take the normal one. Let's leave the nice one. So it's just normal for people to be late. So if it's just normal for people to be late, when you're irritated, aren't they thinking that, are you crazy for feeling irritated for me being normal? Isn't that how they feel? So guess what happens? So now you are frustrated, and you might be more frustrated when to them it's normal. So what do you want to achieve? What's your outcome? What do you want to feel? You want to feel okay. You want to feel all right, right? So what's
That's
the
correct,
effective
yes.
alternative scenario? So you don't want to feel irritated. So what other approach can you take about these people who disrespect your time? You don't want the disrespect. So how can you help these people not disrespect your time? What can you do? Now that it's normal to them, think about it. To them, it's normal being late. What can you do? What's the other approach? It's normal for them to be late. What can you do?
One other, I usually make a joke the first time about it. And then the second time, tell them that the meeting is about 5 minutes earlier. So hopefully they'll arrive on time.
Right. You've answered me already. As an example, I don't want to take a lot of the time, but you've come up with solutions to help you feel less irritated. So you tell them that you're meeting at 12:30 and you only start driving from your house at 12:30 because you know they'll be there at 1. That's your effective alternative scenario. It doesn't frustrate you. You cannot, unfortunately, majority of us want to control these people to teach them time. But hey, they've got 30, 40 years experience of being late. And you come into their life 2 years ago, and now you want to teach them to undo 30 years of life. Are you patient enough to take them through that course? If not, what's the effective alternative scenario? I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, it does. Thank you.
Toastmaster Francois, you have your hand up. If you could unmute and ask your question.
Good evening to you. Sorry, it's good afternoon for me on my neck of the woods. Okay, and sorry I'm not having my camera on. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. My question is an example to the previous, not the immediate previous question, but before that, on having your how to influence change. My question is, if you're working with a CEO who do not in any way wish to allow you to be that influence you can at the workplace, how then should you show your professionalism without going into that dark place, because in one of the what do you call it, in one of the the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, the one of the emotional intelligence that you mentioned, I can give you a real life example. I was working with a CEO that no matter, even if I'm leading from behind and just want to see a change that can benefit everyone, which include the company on a whole, the board, the manager herself is not a type of person that do not in any way accepts anyone ideas or anyone position of seeing it going forward, unless it comes from her herself. She thinks of it in the wrong way, thinking that you might want to take the position when that's not the case. So it has been a struggle to ensure that it shows that leadership, even in that small role that you're in, but it also as well to quenches your professionalism at the same time. So when you say I am good, oh, I'm good, but then in the back of your mind, you actually not good at all. So how do you overcome when you're working with a CEO who's like that?
Beautiful question. And I suspect I might have a short answer for this. I hope it is. So the first thing that I would say to you is, number one, you've got to decide, is that the place where you want to be at? Is that the culture that you want to be associated with? So earlier I spoke about recognizing negativity and then taking yourself out of it. Some of us are in these toxic places and we're staying there because of whatever other reasons, whether it's at least putting food on the table or whatever reason. Now you need to obviously make an informed decision whether or not putting food on your table is just as important as your emotional health or your wealth, your emotional health. I know particularly in many of the environments that I do training in, many of these people are at the brink of depression. And unfortunately, we don't recognize it because we're in these toxic work cultures. And I always advise, and it's not a professional advice, but I always personally advise, if your work culture does not speak to you as your values, your person, take yourself out of it and don't dig your own grave by, putting yourself in a toxic environment and then having to be depressed about it and having to go through all the emotion, because unfortunately your emotional health is not up for sale, as someone would put it out as. However, on the other side, number two, it's also, like I said, we can't do anything about this boss. This is who he is. He loves himself the way he is. In fact, he is perfect the way he sees himself. So you want to see this change. You want to see this change. For example, you want to start seeing people coming to work wearing jeans and t-shirts. You don't want them to wear suits anymore. Your boss does not think it's a great idea because he didn't come up with the idea. What's your challenge? Your challenge now is to make him make it appear as though he is the one who's coming up with this idea. In other streets, they call this manipulation. In our professional streets, we call this influence. You now have the challenge to influence him to make it his idea. And how do people influence? You might have seen it in movies or in documentaries, or you might have experienced it, or you might be doing it. How about, what do you think of this idea? I think you must champion it. And that person feels like they came up with this idea. And obviously, that conversation is critical in a non-harming, non-threatening, and a non-controlling. But if you are really after his job or her job, then he's right to feel insecure. And so he's always going to try and block it his way. But like I said, it's the choice that you have. Do you want to be the hero of the story and then see the change? Or do you want to influence the change in that space? Remember, before you try and change that other person, you've got to see what impact, what influence do I have in myself to influence other people to do it. And that's where the concept of lead without a title comes in. I hope that gives you ideas. I'm not sure if it really solves your problem of the boss, but I hope it gives you ideas to get started.
Thank you, it did. I thank you so much. I'm glad that I've joined this program from the Caribbean island of Antigua. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, DTM Andrew. Then Toastmaster Marie says, what book will you recommend on emotional intelligence? We had two responses, Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. And then we also had a book for parents on emotional intelligence, How to Raise a Child with a High EQ by Lawrence E. and Shapiro. Do you have any other books that you would recommend?
And none other than Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and any of his literature is highly recommended. He is our guru when it comes to EQ. But like I said, you cannot learn a skill by just reading. I think it's a practice thing. And I think most of these things we know, we just need to be more conscious when we practice EQ by our habits. But the book, EQ by Daniel Goleman, is my #1 recommended. And if you were to look into another one, it would be How to Win and Influence Friends by Dale Carnegie, if I'm not mistaken.
Great, thank you. Toastmaster Mduduzi is asking, how do you prepare somebody for constructive feedback? Because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach.
Cool. So great question. So the question is, do you know this person well to know what it is they are fond of and not fond of? So I'll give you a particular example. When I'm giving feedback to someone you know very well, being my brother, Frank, majority of you know Frank. When I give feedback to Frank, I don't just blurt it out and say, you should have done this or you could do this. When I want to give him some feedback, I make sure that I either get him some Coke or Coca-Cola, that is, or I get him some ice cream, vanilla ice cream, and then we have a conversation about it. And then we start talking about it. How do you feel about this situation? What could, I was thinking maybe you considered us doing it this way. And so, but obviously it starts with the preamble of, do you want us to reflect on this event or this session or this situation that we dealt with? And if the answer is yes, we can talk about it. I'm like, yeah, okay, so what do you think went well? And obviously the way we evaluate in Toastmasters is the same approach that we take. And the same thing with me, when he's giving me feedback, I'm like, not now, let's talk about it after a day or two. Right now, I'm still in the emotions around it. In a relationship, in your partner or your husband or wife, you obviously know their tendencies. Sometimes they don't want to get that feedback at that point in time because they're going to meet people. So you want to check when would be a good time for us to talk about this? Never. Okay, let it slide. At that point in time, it should be a signal that they're not ready. The next time you ask, when would be a good time? Is it still not possible for us to just chat about it? No, not now. And then you obviously probe it at that point in time. Sometimes people are not willing to listen to feedback throughout. So don't force it on them. Otherwise, they will not buy into it or they will not action it, even though they need to hear it. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Mtanti.
Thank you. Toastmaster Sakile asks, how do you avoid being triggered in a conversation? I was once told to count to 10. What is an effective way to remove yourself from the situation and not compromise your brand equity?
Beautiful question. So there are many techniques you know better. However, I always say to people, be careful of adopting my coping mechanism. So if I were to be in a confronting situation, a conflict situation, water does not help me. Taking a walk in the park does not help me. A mint does not help me. Counting to 10 does not help me. What works for me is when I literally pack my bags and go to a secret location, get myself Coke and sour worms, and then I'll be fine. That's what works for me. What about you? What is it? Again, it goes back to that self-awareness. What makes you tick? Some people, just going for a run is therapeutic. It clears their mind. It takes them. Some people, it's crying. So you also want to adopt that. It's just a matter of now, how do you action it or how do you execute it? And part of that execution could be living. I had a client of mine who used to just, when they are just full of emotions, they excuse themselves. Can I be excused for 5 minutes? If it's in a meeting, they go shed tears in the bathroom, puff themselves up with makeup, then they come back, then they're ready to face whatever they need to face. Again, identify what works for you and apply it accordingly. Be careful, I would say, be careful of adopting my coping mechanism and expecting it to work for you. Identify what it is that would work for you. Some people it's just dressing up. Some people it's just having a drink with something with a percentage. That's what calms them down. Some people it's chocolate. Some people it's ice cream. What works for you? And that again goes back to self-awareness. So I can't necessarily give you exactly what, but I would say be careful of that. And obviously just avoid responding immediately in response to it, whether it's an email or something, take time to get through it. I hope that answers your question. I can't remember who asked.
Thank you, Toastmaster Andrew. We'll just take one last question, Toastmaster Will. Then any other questions that have not been addressed in the chat box, we will then take those into the WhatsApp group and get DTM Andrew to then answer those. So if you still had a question, please do type it in the chat box and we will pick up the responses from DTM Andrew in the WhatsApp group. Toastmaster Will, please go ahead.
DTM Andrew, you have opened up a can of worms. We were presented with a situation whereby someone didn't respect your time. And you gave us a lot of ideas in terms of how to respond to that. Now, bearing in mind that the one thing in your life that you can't buy more of is your time, you should obviously then understand when someone says to you that it's the most valuable thing that they actually have to give. So I've been presented with a few of these situations where people decide to pitch up late and, you know, in a way disrespect my time in that sense. But I felt like, okay, fine, you know, if someone has that issue and they had some reason, whether it be whatever, understandable, justifiable in their own eyes, whatever, that one shouldn't make a mountain out of a molehill because you don't know the whole situation. I grant you that. But I also discovered that if I'm going to consult, especially on a professional level with a client, and I arrange for them to come and see me for an hour at my hourly rates, and they pitch up 20 minutes late, then they must also understand that if they're going to go anything further than that 40 minutes, I'm going to bill them for that second hour, and I'm going to feel absolutely rocks about that. Because if you're not going to value what I give you, then maybe you'll value what you have to actually give up for it.
So are you asking for my take on that? Because it's a pretty interesting one.
Interesting.
So my take on it is, number one, there is no must, there is no should, there is no have to when it comes to someone else. You don't have control over them, you only have influence over them. So they must not understand. You're going to help them understand. You're going to influence them to understand. You're going to help them understand that they will be billed. And that comes in what we call contracts in business or in communication. This is where communication comes into play. They should not understand. They must not understand. You have to help them understand. And so again, the only thing that you can say have to, must is yourself. Others you have no control over, and so that's where you help them understand. And again, that understanding comes with communication, as you rightly put it. So you need to let them know that should you come in late, I do a lot of consulting, so I know very well what you're referring to. Should you come in late, we only have this time remaining. Your hour scheduled is this time. Are you okay with that? Yes or no? No, let's deal with what you're not okay with. Yes, then all is well in sundry and glory. So that's how I'll take that. And I hope that answers that gives you a perspective in my view around this.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for the question and answer segment, DTM Andrew. And I will now ask you to give us the assignment for this particular session. Over to you, DTM Andrew.
I will do that, and may I ask for 3 extra minutes? I know my assignment is 5 minutes, but I'll ask for 3 extra minutes to just highlight the last part of this. Now, the assignment for this week is as follows, possibly the most engaging of your time as part of the program. Number one, I would love you to design or review your created identities. For some of you, you've got a vision board already. I just want you to design, if you don't have one, design something that highlights your created identity. If you've got something, I just want you to revise or review it. In your revision, I want you to highlight the aura you want to exude when you contact people. That is, what kind of words do you want to be associated by? What kind of body language do you want to be associated with? And what kind of image do you want to be seen as? So if you walk into a room, what kind of energy do you want people to get? When you're speaking to people, do you want people to think you're timid, you're assertive, you're passive, or you are a smooth talker? What kind of aura do you want to give out in that space? And then that's part one. Part two, on each day, I would like to ask you to consider the following. Number one, as you start your day, journal your feelings. Check in with yourself. How am I feeling? How am I really feeling? Identify that feeling and take note of it. Understand what that feeling is. As your day continues, journal and discover your triggers if you're not sure. There are some triggers that they trigger you and then they trip you off. I want you to just journal them and take note of those triggers as you go on with your day, whatever it is, whether it's from your kids, from your partner, or from your friends or your enemies. Journal those triggers. And last but not least, at the end of the day, I'd like you to reflect on your level of fulfillment. How fulfilled are you at the end of this day? And so this task is 7 days. Where you can share, please do share. I think some of you already connected with me on social media and so forth. And sometimes I check in with people on, particularly on the closed doors, but journal those feelings for yourself. And then, but I would love to see, particularly what I would love to see at the end of the week is your reviewed created identity and the kind of aura you want to give in a room when you walk in. And most importantly, I want you to start this habit of checking with your feelings in the morning, journaling your triggers during the day and the level of fulfillment you have at the end of the day, each day. And if possible, where it's not too private, please do feel free to document that and upload it in the drive, and I'll have a look at it and then reach out to you where there's same way where I feel I could be of help in. But that will obviously be shared as well in our group in terms of the assignment. But to close off, I want to close off with this.
May I have this? No. Why don't you get something special for Grandpa? I'm sorry. Can I return the cake, please?
Sure, yes.
I want the cake, please. I won't ask for anything else.
Next time, okay? When we can afford it?
Last time you said that.
You don't want this? I'll take it back. Hey. Hello, this is for you.
No, we cannot accept it.
Would you please?
There's no reason for you to buy the cake for us.
Well, when I was 7, my mother wanted to buy me a cake.
Mommy, I want this one.
But at the counter, we didn't have enough.
Can we get something else?
A It's my birthday today. Can I choose my own cake, please?
I'm sorry.
Then there's this man. I've never met him before.
Here, have the cake. Happy birthday.
I didn't know his name. I never got a chance to say thank you. I've never forgotten about him. The man in the queue.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Can I have your contact number? Let me repay you when we have the money.
Promise me something, okay? Someday, when you're able to help somebody, you will do it?
May I know your name, mister?
Well, I'm the man in the queue.
I chose this cake for your birthday.
Wow, this is my favorite. Thank you.
Let's go and put some candles.
Oh, careful. You shouldn't have spent the money.
Actually, a kind man paid for it.
You give me this note.
Please write down your address. I'll bring the money back to you later.
A simple act of caring creates an endless ripple.
That comes back to you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh, too often when we are faced with challenging situations, you've got an opportunity to create an endless ripple. And if you're emotionally intelligent, you're going to create an endless ripple that comes back to you by practicing empathy so that you can live a fulfilled life. All the best with your journey of emotional intelligence. Back to you, Madam Program Director.
Thank you so much, DTM Andrew, for spending the past 2 hours with us and taking us through emotional intelligence. I personally have learned a lot in the time that we've been here, and we continue to grow. I want to thank everyone who was able to participate today, and I am giving you permission to call out your accountability partner if they were not here this evening. I am giving you permission to call out your accountability partner if they were not in today's meeting. So inbox them, tell them what they've missed out on, encourage them to attend next week, or maybe even to just then find out what may have been the challenge. It could have been network issues or whatever the case may be, but so that they know you do care about them and you're also wanting them to continue growing. We are done with our session 4. We move on to session 5 next week, the 30th of October, and I look forward to all of you joining us. And there's a Toastmaster who joined in with a Galaxy A10. Please let us know who you are for the attendance register purposes. And the assignment will be shared in the group. And the questions in the chat box that were not addressed, we will request for DTM Andrew to also then answer those once we then share them in the chat group over the next couple of days. So thank you so much, everyone, for continuing on this journey, and let's keep up the momentum. Let's continue coming with that growth mindset and wanting to continue to learn. And I applaud you for having come this far so far. Don't slow down. Let's get our assignments in. If you are behind, catch up and still upload your assignments, because we are still getting the industry experts to check on those assignments, and we may get more information from them in terms of helping us to be more effective in our leadership. And at exactly 2000 hours, meeting adjourned.
Are there going to be photographs?
Yes.
Photos?
Yes, thank you for the reminder, our Zoom masters. If we could turn on our videos so that we can have our photo moments, and please do look happy. You never know when your one is being taken. So just keep that permanent smile. They will let us know when they are done. Yes, keep on smiling. Toastmaster Andrew Kendall, I see you very happy. You are enjoying the sessions. Keep on smiling.
Okay, I got shots of all 4 screens. I wonder, I think Selena also did take shots.
Yes, I did.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our Zoom masters, Toastmaster Selena, Toastmaster Bertus. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will see you next Saturday, 6 p.m. Central Africa time. And we will also engage in the group.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.